The Brooklyn Heights mansion stood like a fortress against the night sky, its windows ablaze with golden light that spilled onto manicured lawns. Men in tailored Italian suits conversed in hushed tones on the terrace, while women draped in designer gowns and diamonds circulated through the grand ballroom. This was no ordinary gathering of New York elite. Every person present carried influence that extended far beyond legitimate business into the shadows of power that truly controlled the city. At the center of it all stood Dominic Castellano. At 45 years old, he commanded the room without speaking a word. His 6'2" frame carried the perfect balance of physical power and refined elegance. Silver threads at his temples added distinguished character to his otherwise dark hair, and his amber eyes missed nothing. As head of the Castellano family for 15 years, he had transformed much of their business into legitimate enterprises. His chain of upscale Sicilian restaurants, wine import company, and extensive real estate holdings across New York generated millions in legal revenue. Yet beneath this venerable facade, Dominic still maintained control of Brooklyn's docks and protection operations that had been Castellano territory for generations. Vincent Romano approached, leaning close to whisper in his ear. Everyone has arrived, including the Gambinos and Lucchese's. The Russians sent representatives too. Dominic nodded almost imperceptibly. And my father? Waiting in the library. He says he wishes to make his entrance once all guests have assembled. Dominic checked his watch, a vintage Patek Philippe that had belonged to his grandfather. The 75th anniversary celebration of the Castellano Empire required perfect execution. 15 years ago, when his wife Maria was killed in an assassination meant for him, Dominic had vowed two things: to protect their daughter Sophia with his life and to ensure the family legacy would survive for generations to come. Vincent cleared his throat. The staff has been thoroughly vetted. Personally. Dominic adjusted his platinum cufflinks engraved with the Castellano crest. Each server signed confidentiality agreements and was warned about the consequences of overhearing any sensitive conversations. The grand oak doors at the far end of the ballroom opened. Victor Castellano entered and the room fell silent in waves as guests noticed his presence. At 75, Victor remained an imposing figure. His traditional black suit and silver lion's head cane spoke of old-world authority. Though Dominic had run the family operations for 15 years, Victor's word remained final in matters of tradition and honor. Dominic moved through the crowd to greet his father, taking the old man's hand and kissing his cheek respectfully. A magnificent gathering, my son. Victor surveyed the room with sharp blue eyes that had lost none of their intensity with age. Our family's 75 years in America deserves nothing less. Dominic guided his father to the center of the room where a small stage had been prepared. A gentle tap on a microphone brought complete silence. Distinguished guests, family and friends, Dominic began, his deep voice carrying authority throughout the ballroom. Tonight we celebrate 3 generations of Castellano heritage in America. From humble beginnings in Sicily to becoming an integral part of New York's business landscape. Please join me in welcoming the man who built much of what we enjoy today, my father, Victor Castellano. Applause filled the room as Victor took the microphone. He spoke with the slight accent that still colored his English after decades in America. 75 years ago, my father, Salvatore Castellano, arrived at Ellis Island with nothing but determination and the ancient values of Sicily. Honor, family, legacy. Victor paused, his gaze sweeping the room. Tonight, as we celebrate what we have built together, I believe it is time to fulfill an obligation that has remained incomplete for too long. The blood oath of Sicily must finally be honored. A murmur ran through the crowd. Dominic kept his expression neutral, though inwardly he tensed. His father had mentioned nothing about a blood oath in their planning discussions. Enjoy the celebration, Victor concluded with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The night is young and there is much to discuss. As the orchestra resumed playing, Dominic escorted his father to a private corner. What blood oath? Dominic asked quietly, ensuring no one could overhear. Victor tapped his cane once on the marble floor. Some debts transcend generations, my son. The Ferraro debt must finally be settled. Ferraro. Dominic's brow furrowed. That family disappeared decades ago. Not disappeared, hidden. Victor's eyes gleamed with something Dominic hadn't seen in years. And now the time has come to restore what was broken. Before Dominic could press further, Vincent approached urgently. Antonio Ricci just arrived. Vincent reported, tension evident in his voice. Uninvited. Dominic straightened his jacket. Antonio Ricci, head of the rival Ricci family, had been pushing against Castellano territory for years. His arrival uninvited was nothing short of a deliberate provocation. Keep Sophia away from him, Dominic instructed, referring to his 22-year-old daughter who was attending her first major family function. And double security at all entrances. As Vincent departed to execute these orders, Victor gripped Dominic's arm with surprising strength. Remember who we are, the old man said firmly. Whatever happens tonight will shape our legacy for the next 75 years. Across Brooklyn, in a small apartment with peeling paint and secondhand furniture, Elena Ferraro rushed to get ready for work. At 25, she possessed a natural beauty that required little enhancement. Her dark curls fell past her shoulders, framing olive skin and expressive brown eyes that reflected her Sicilian heritage. She fastened simple gold earrings that had belonged to her grandmother while glancing anxiously at the clock. "Isabella," she called out, "did you take your medication?" In the small living room, Isabella Ferraro sat in her worn armchair near the window. At 78, her once black hair had turned silver, though her posture remained proudly erect despite her failing health. She looked up from the worn photo album in her lap. "Yes, tesoro mio, stop worrying so much about an old woman." Elena knelt beside her grandmother's chair, gently taking her hand. "The doctor said we need to be careful with your heart. The new medication is expensive, but I found an extra catering job tonight that pays triple my usual rate." Isabella's expression darkened. "What kind of catering job pays triple? Some wealthy family in Brooklyn Heights. Anniversary celebration or something." Elena adjusted her white blouse and black pants, the standard uniform for servers. "The manager said it's very exclusive. We had to sign all kinds of confidentiality agreements." Isabella tensed her fingers, tightening around the photo album. "Which family?" Elena shrugged, checking her appearance one last time in the small mirror by the door. "Romano didn't say. Just some rich people who don't want their conversations repeated. I'll be home by midnight." "Be careful, Elena." Isabella's voice took on an urgency that made Elena turn. "Some rich families in New York have deep secrets. Sometimes it's better not to hear them." Elena smiled reassuringly, though her grandmother's intensity was unusual. "I'll be invisible, I promise. Just another server with a tray. No one will even notice me." She kissed her grandmother's cheek and hurried out, unaware of how Isabella clutched the photo album to her chest, fingers trembling as she touched a faded photograph hidden between its pages. The staff entrance of the Castellano mansion bustled with activity as Elena arrived. Catering trucks unloaded exquisite food displays, while florists made last-minute adjustments to elaborate arrangements of white roses and lilies. Elena reported to Anthony Romano, the catering manager who had hired her. "You're just in time," Romano said, checking her name off his list. His perpetually worried expression deepened as he lowered his voice. "Special instructions for tonight. Serve drinks, remain silent, and never make eye contact with any Castellano family members." Elena felt a chill at the name. "Castellano, as in the family that owns half of Brooklyn," Romano interrupted sharply. "This isn't a night for questions, Elena. Just do your job and forget anything you might overhear. These are dangerous people." Another server passing by whispered one wrong word to these people, and you disappear forever. Romano handed Elena a silver tray of champagne flutes. "Remember, invisible, silent, no eye contact." Elena nodded, her heart suddenly pounding against her ribs. Castellano. The name seemed vaguely familiar, though she couldn't place why. Perhaps her grandmother had mentioned them once in her stories about old Sicily. The grandeur of the main ballroom momentarily stunned Elena as she entered with her tray. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across marble floors. Artwork that belonged in museums hung on walls, and the guests themselves were adorned with jewelry worth more than she would earn in a lifetime. Elena moved carefully through the crowd, keeping her eyes down as instructed, while offering champagne. The conversations around her shifted fluidly between English and Italian, with occasional phrases in what sounded like an old Sicilian dialect, similar to what her grandmother sometimes spoke. Despite her anxiety, Elena felt a strange familiarity with the cadence and tone of these exchanges. "The Russian deal must be finalized before the end of the month," one man said quietly to another as they selected champagne from her tray. "The merchandise from the docks needs to be moved quickly," his companion replied. Elena kept her expression neutral, focusing on balancing her tray as she moved to another group. She'd nearly completed her circuit of the room when a sudden shift in the atmosphere made her look up. The crowd had parted respectfully for an elderly man leaning on an ornate cane with a silver lion's head handle. Elena immediately recognized him as Victor Castellano from the speech earlier. She tried to step aside discreetly, but in the process, Victor's elbow bumped against her tray, causing champagne to slosh dangerously. Without thinking, Elena steadied the tray with one hand while using the other to prevent the elderly man from stumbling. Mi scusi, signore, she said automatically, then added in the old Sicilian dialect her grandmother had taught her. Stasi attento rispettato patriarca. Careful, respected patriarch. The words flowed naturally, a respectful form of address her grandmother had insisted she learn properly. Only when she saw the shock on Victor's face did Elena realize her mistake. The room fell into a sudden, tense silence. Victor Castellano stared at her with intense scrutiny. Where did you learn to speak the old dialect? Young lady, few Americans, even those with Sicilian heritage, speak it with such authenticity. Before Elena could formulate a response, Romano appeared at her side, face ashen. I'm so sorry, Mr. Castellano. She's new. She doesn't understand the protocols. Victor raised a single finger, silencing the manager without taking his eyes off Elena. Your name, child? Elena Ferraro, sir. She answered softly, conscious of dozens of calculating stares now focused on her. Victor's expression changed dramatically at the mention of her surname. Ferraro, from which part of Sicily does your family originate? My grandmother's family came from a small village in the hills above Palermo. Elena replied, heart racing as she sensed the significance of this exchange. She married an American soldier after the war and moved here. A commanding presence materialized beside Victor. Dominic Castellano stood tall in a perfectly tailored black suit, his expression unreadable as he assessed the situation. Is there a problem with the staff, Father? Dominic asked, his voice deceptively soft, though his dark gaze swept over Elena with clinical assessment. Victor switched to rapid Sicilian dialect, speaking so quickly that Elena struggled to follow, though she caught phrases about Ferraro blood and the oath. Dominic's eyebrows rose fractionally as he listened, his gaze intensifying as he studied Elena more carefully. Miss Ferraro, my father would be honored if you would join our table. Dominic translated unnecessarily, the slight quirk of his mouth suggesting he suspected she understood perfectly. It seems you have impressed him, which is unusual. Across the room, Romano was signaling frantically, drawing his finger across his throat in the universal gesture to stop immediately. But the Castellanos weren't making a request. They were giving an order, disguised as an invitation. I'm working, sir, Elena replied, carefully balancing her tray in increasingly sweaty hands. The guest needs service, and I can't abandon my position without permission from my supervisor. Victor laughed, a warm, genuine sound that seemed out of place in the tense atmosphere. He switched to English and addressed the room. This celebration marks 75 years of our family in America. Yet the most authentic gift comes from an unexpected quarter. A simple waitress who speaks our village dialect. Dominic's hand closed gently but firmly around Elena's elbow, relieving her of the champagne tray with his other hand and passing it to a nearby server. Your supervisor works for the catering company, which works for me, he said, his breath warm against her ear as he guided her toward the main table. Elena felt dozens of calculating stares following her progress across the ballroom, sizing her up as either threat or opportunity. Her simple black uniform stood in stark contrast to the designer evening wear surrounding her, marking her as clearly out of place in this world of power and privilege. The patriarch settled into the seat of honor at the center of the table, gesturing for Elena to take the empty chair beside him, a place clearly reserved for someone important. Dominic took the seat on her other side, effectively trapping her between the two most powerful men in the room. Tell me, child, Victor said, studying her face carefully. Is your grandmother perhaps Isabella Ferraro, daughter of Giovanni? Elena's heart raced as she nodded slowly, suddenly understanding she had stumbled into something far more complex than a catering job. Yes, sir. How did you know? Victor exchanged a loaded glance with his son. Instead of answering directly, he extracted an aged photograph from his jacket pocket. The black and white image showed two young men standing proudly in front of a wooden sailing vessel. The harbor behind them was unmistakably Brooklyn's waterfront, though from many decades earlier. This is myself and your great-grandfather, Victor said softly. Giovanni Ferraro and Victor Castellano, 1948. We were more than business partners. We were blood brothers. Elena stared at the photograph in disbelief. Her grandmother had told stories of Sicily, of family left behind, but had never mentioned a connection to the Castellano name. Our families controlled the import of olive oil, wine, and Sicilian goods into America, Victor continued. From humble beginnings, we built an empire together, until 1955, when tragedy tore our families apart. Dominic leaned forward, his skepticism evident. Father, this could be anyone. We have no verification that she's actually related to the Ferraros we knew. Victor shot his son a stern glance. Look at her eyes, Dominic. The same eyes as Giovanni's daughter, Isabella. The same spirit. He turned back to Elena. Your grandmother never told you about us. Elena shook her head slowly. She tells stories about Sicily, about the old country, but never mentioned your family. Because the pain was too great. Victor sighed heavily. The explosion at the dockyard in 1955. Many lives lost from both families. Accusations made in grief and anger. Your grandparents fled believing we had betrayed them. The conversation halted abruptly as a ripple of tension passed through the ballroom. Elena followed Dominic's suddenly alert gaze to the entrance where a man in his mid-50s had appeared. Impeccably dressed in a gray suit with a blood-red tie, he carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to being feared. Antonio Ricci, Dominic murmured, his body language shifting subtly into a protective stance. I don't recall his name on the guest list. Victor's expression hardened. The Ricci family has always been opportunistic. Antonio must have heard rumors about tonight's announcement. Ricci made his way directly toward their table, flanked by two men whose bulging jackets poorly concealed their weapons. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees as conversation died away, replaced by wary observation. Victor, Dominic, Ricci greeted them with exaggerated warmth that failed to reach his cold eyes. Forgive my uninvited appearance, but I couldn't miss the celebration of such an esteemed family. His gaze shifted to Elena, lingering uncomfortably. And who might this lovely addition be? Before Elena could respond, Dominic stood positioning himself slightly between her and Ricci. Family business, Antonio. Nothing that concerns you. Ricci smiled thinly. Family business. How interesting. He studied Elena more intently. You have the look of the old country about you, young lady. Sicilian blood shows strongly after generations. Elena felt a chill at his scrutiny. Something predatory lurked beneath his polished exterior. Ferraro, Ricci said, suddenly making Elena start. That's what it is. You have the Ferraro look. I thought that line had ended decades ago. Victor's hand tightened on his cane. You were just leaving Antonio. This is a private celebration. Of course, of course. Ricci stepped back, though his eyes remained fixed on Elena. But we should talk soon, Dominic, about the changing landscape at the docks, and perhaps about old debts that remain unsettled. As Ricci departed, Elena noticed Dominic subtly signaled to several men around the room, who immediately began following Ricci's movements. The tension in Dominic's jawline revealed more emotion than he had displayed all evening. Come with me, Victor said to Elena, rising from his chair with unexpected agility. There are things you should see, things your grandmother has perhaps kept from you for too long. Dominic objected immediately. Father, this isn't the time. We know nothing about her. I know enough, Victor replied firmly. The oath I made to Giovanni transcends your concerns, Dominic. Some promises span generations. Reluctantly, Dominic accompanied them as Victor led Elena through the mansion to a private study lined with books and historical artifacts. The old man unlocked an antique cabinet and withdrew a leather album much larger and more ornate than the one Elena had seen her grandmother cherishing earlier that evening. The complete history of our families, Victor explained carefully, laying the album on a mahogany desk. Before the tragedy, before the misunderstandings. Elena gasped as Victor opened the album. There in sepia-toned splendor was her grandmother as a young woman. Isabella stood proudly beside a handsome young man in naval uniform, surrounded by both Castellano and Ferraro family members, on the deck of a magnificent wooden sailing vessel. Your grandparents' engagement celebration 1954, Victor explained. The last time both families were truly united. I don't understand, Elena whispered, tracing her finger over her grandmother's youthful face. Why would she hide this from me? Victor turned several more pages, revealing newspaper clippings with headlines about a dockyard explosion. 6 months after this photo was taken, our shared warehouse exploded. 11 people died, including your great-grandparents and my older brother. Each family blamed the other. Accusations of betrayal and sabotage destroyed 3 generations of partnership. Dominic, who had been examining the photos with increasing interest, pointed to a small detail in one image. The crest on the ship's sail, half eagle, half lion. I've seen this in our family archives, but never understood its significance. The combined Castellano and Ferraro family crest, Victor confirmed. The eagle for Ferraro, the lion for Castellano. Together, they were unbeatable in business and in loyalty. Elena struggled to process this flood of information. But why would my grandmother never mention any of this? Why keep it secret from me? Victor closed the album gently. Fear, perhaps, or shame at what followed. Giovanni and I made a blood oath when we were young men. If anything should happen to either family, the other would protect them. When suspicion fell on us for the explosion, your grandfather believed we had not only failed to protect them, but had actually caused their tragedy. Dominic had moved to the window, keeping watch on the guests below. Richie's interest in you is concerning. The timing isn't coincidental. Victor spat the name like a curse. His father, Lorenzo, was always jealous of our success, always hovering at the edges of our operations. A knock at the door interrupted them. Vincent Romano entered, his expression grave. Dominic's security spotted two of Ricci's men examining the perimeter of the property. Dominic turned to Elena, his expression now deadly serious. Where does your grandmother live? An apartment in Bensonhurst, Elena answered, suddenly alarmed. Why, what's happening? Ricci recognized you, Dominic explained tersely. If he's connected you to the Ferraro family from our past, you both could be in danger. Where is your apartment exactly? Elena gave him the address, her hands beginning to tremble. My grandmother is alone there. She has a heart condition. Dominic immediately issued orders to Vincent. Send 4 men to secure the apartment, discreetly, then prepare a car to take Miss Ferraro home. No, Victor countermanded. It's too dangerous. If Ricci is moving against us tonight, her grandmother should be brought here where we can protect her. Elena stood, panic rising. I need to go to her now. She won't trust your men. She needs to see me. Dominic considered this, then nodded. I'll take you myself. Before Victor could object, he added, 4 armed guards will accompany us. Vincent will increase security here in my absence. As they hurried from the study, Elena caught sight of a beautiful young woman watching them intently from the hallway. Her resemblance to Dominic was unmistakable, from the amber eyes to the proud bearing. My daughter Sophia, Dominic introduced briefly. Sophia, this is Elena Ferraro. We're going to secure her grandmother. Sophia's expression registered surprise at the name Ferraro, but she recovered quickly. The Ferraro family from the old photographs, I thought they were gone. Apparently not, Dominic replied. Stay close to grandfather while I'm gone. Don't leave his side. As they hurried toward the garage, Elena's mind raced with questions. Why had her grandmother kept this connection secret? What was the significance of the blood oath Victor mentioned, and why was Antonio Ricci so interested in her family name? The sleek black Mercedes SUV whispered through Brooklyn streets, flanked by 2 identical vehicles filled with Dominic's security personnel. Elena sat tensely in the passenger seat, watching Dominic's profile as he drove with focused precision. My grandmother won't be happy to see you, Elena ventured. If what your father said is true, she believes your family betrayed hers. Dominic's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. My concern is her safety, not her approval. Ricci is dangerous, and if he's connecting old dots, both our families are at risk. Why would he care about something that happened in 1955? Because the past is never truly buried in our world, Dominic answered, checking the rearview mirror for tales. Old grudges, old treasures, old secrets. They surface when least expected. As they turned onto Elena's street, Dominic suddenly slowed the vehicle. Something's wrong, he said sharply, his hand moving inside his jacket. Elena followed his gaze and felt her heart stop. The lights in her apartment were on, but the door stood open, spilling illumination into the hallway. Even from the street, she could see furniture overturned. Stay in the car, Dominic ordered, but Elena was already out the door, running toward the building with terror propelling her forward. She burst into the apartment to find devastation. Every drawer emptied, every cushion slashed, every book torn apart. Isabella, she screamed, rushing from room to room. She found her grandmother, collapsed beside her bed, breathing but unconscious. The worn photo album lay open beside her, several photos missing. Dominic entered behind her, gun drawn, as his men secured the perimeter. Upon seeing the elderly woman, he immediately holstered his weapon and knelt to check her pulse. She needs an ambulance, he said, already dialing on his phone. Her pulse is irregular. As emergency services were dispatched, Elena noticed something clutched in her grandmother's hand, a small piece of paper. She gently extracted it to find a threatening message scrawled in harsh black ink. Ferraro should know their place. The treasure belongs to Ricci. When the paramedics arrived, they confirmed Isabella had suffered a cardiac episode likely triggered by shock or fear. As they prepared to transport her, Isabella briefly regained consciousness, her eyes widening in terror at the sight of Dominic standing beside Elena. Castellano, she whispered hoarsely, clutching Elena's hand. Don't trust them. They destroyed our family once. We're here to help Mrs. Ferraro, Dominic said formally. Your granddaughter is under my protection now. Isabella's eyes filled with tears. Elena, the wall. Check behind the painting. What's hidden will explain everything. Her eyes fluttered closed as the medication took effect. As the ambulance departed with Isabella, Elena noticed Dominic studying the ransacked apartment with professional assessment. They were looking for something specific, he noted, not random vandalism. Elena moved to the faded landscape painting that had hung in their apartment for as long as she could remember. Behind it, she discovered a small section of wall that seemed newer than the surrounding plaster. There's something here, she called to Dominic, who joined her immediately. Working together, they broke through the thin plaster to reveal a metal box sealed with an ancient-looking padlock. Using a pry bar from his car, Dominic opened the box to reveal a treasure trove of documents, old deeds, shipping manifests, business agreements between the Castellano and Ferraro families dating back to the 1940s. Most importantly, they found a detailed map of Brooklyn's waterfront with a specific section circled in red ink. The date on the map, March 10, 1955, 1 week before the explosion that tore the families apart. This is why they came, Dominic said quietly, examining the map. This is what Ricci is after. Elena lifted an old brass key with a peculiar design from the bottom of the box. Half eagle, half lion, the same crest she had seen in the photographs. Whatever this opens, Dominic said, taking the key carefully, it's worth killing for. Elena's phone rang, displaying the hospital number. Her hands trembled as she answered, listening intently before her face crumpled in distress. My grandmother had another episode in the ambulance, she explained, struggling to maintain composure. They're rushing her into surgery. Her heart can't take the stress. Dominic made an immediate decision. We'll go to the hospital now. My men will secure this evidence and take it to my home. Why are you helping us? Elena asked, studying his face for deception. Your father mentioned a blood oath, but that was generations ago. Dominic's expression remained carefully controlled, but something flickered in his eyes. In my world, Miss Ferraro oaths don't expire with time. They bind families across generations. He paused, then added, and Antonio Ricci has been a thorn in my side for 15 years. He took something irreplaceable from me. I won't let him harm your family too. As they prepared to leave for the hospital, Elena noticed a small photograph that had fallen under the bed during the ransacking. It showed her grandmother as a young woman standing between two men on a Brooklyn street. She recognized Victor Castellano immediately, but the other man was unfamiliar, though something about his features resonated with her. She turned the photo over and felt her blood freeze at the inscription, Victor Giovanni and Lorenzo, celebrating new partnership 1947. Lorenzo, Antonio Ricci's father. The connections between these three families ran deeper than she could have imagined, and Elena sensed that her grandmother's collapse was only the beginning of a storm that had been brewing for 70 years. The pristine corridors of Brooklyn Methodist Hospital gleamed under fluorescent lights as Elena paced the surgical waiting area. 4 hours had passed since Isabella was rushed into emergency heart surgery. The gravity of the situation hung in the air like a physical weight. Elena ran her fingers through her dark curls, exhaustion and worry etched across her face. Dominic Castellano sat nearby, his imposing presence drawing curious glances from hospital staff. Despite the late hour, his appearance remained immaculate, though he had removed his suit jacket and loosened his tie slightly. He ended a quiet phone call and approached Elena. The surgeon will be out soon. I've arranged for the best cardiac specialist in New York to consult on your grandmother's case. Elena glanced up, conflicting emotions battling within her. Why are you still here? You've done your duty bringing us to the hospital. Dominic studied her face, his amber eyes revealing nothing of his thoughts. The men who ransacked your apartment were professionals. They'll discover you weren't home alone soon enough. Until we understand what they want, you're safer with me. What they want is obvious, Elena replied, lowering her voice. The map, the key, whatever secret my grandmother and your father have kept buried for decades. Perhaps. Dominic checked his watch, a habit Elena had noticed he repeated when processing information. But professional thieves don't typically leave threatening notes. That was personal. Before Elena could respond, the surgical doors swung open. A weary-looking doctor in blue scrubs approached them. His expression remained professionally neutral, but the fatigue in his eyes spoke volume. So, Ferraro, your grandmother survived the surgery, but her condition remains critical. The damage to her heart was extensive. Without the immediate intervention, she wouldn't have made it through the night. Elena's knees weakened with relief and renewed fear. Can I see her, Bermo? She's in recovery now. Once she's stabilized, they'll move her to intensive care. The surgeon hesitated, glancing at a tablet with Isabella's records. I should mention the financial aspect. This procedure and the necessary follow-up care are quite expensive without comprehensive insurance. Dominic stepped forward smoothly. The expenses have been covered. Mrs. Ferraro will receive the best care available for as long as necessary. The doctor nodded clearly, recognizing something in Dominic's bearing that discouraged further questions. As he departed, Elena turned to Dominic with suspicion. I can't accept that. I don't even know what you want in return. Consider it partial repayment of an old debt between our families. Dominic's tone made it clear the matter wasn't open for discussion. Now we need to address your security situation. Your apartment isn't safe. I'm not leaving my grandmother. I've arranged for private security outside her room. No one enters without clearance. Dominic's phone vibrated with an incoming message. He checked it, his expression darkening. We need to move now. Ricci's men have been asking questions at your apartment building. They'll check hospitals next. Elena stood her ground. I'm not going anywhere until I see my grandmother. Something in her determination seemed to resonate with Dominic. After a moment, he nodded. 10 minutes, then we leave. My home is the only place safe from Ricci's reach in Brooklyn. When Isabella was finally moved to intensive care, Elena entered the sterile room alone. The sight of her fierce, proud grandmother, reduced to a fragile figure amid tubes and monitoring equipment, broke something inside her. She took Isabella's hand, gently mindful of the IV line. Nonna, she whispered in the Sicilian dialect they shared. I'm here. You're going to be all right. Isabella's eyelids fluttered, weakly, consciousness swimming up through layers of anesthesia. Her voice, when it came, was barely audible. Elena, the wall. I found it. The box, the documents, the map, everything. Fear sparked in Isabella's eyes. Castellano, don't trust. He saved your life tonight, Elena said gently. Victor's son, Dominic. He brought us to the hospital, arranged for your surgery. Isabella's fingers tightened around Elena's with surprising strength. Not what it seems. The explosion. Your grandfather found proof. Dominic's father. A nurse entered to check Isabella's vitals, forcing Elena to step back. You need to rest, Nonna. Don't try to talk. Isabella struggled against the sedation. Listen, the key, Banco Siciliano, safe deposit, truth. The nurse adjusted Isabella's medication, causing her words to slur as she drifted back into unconsciousness. Elena kissed her grandmother's forehead, promising to return soon, though uncertainty clouded this vow. As she stepped into the hallway, she found Dominic speaking quietly with Vincent Romano. We need to move, Dominic said upon seeing her. Vincent just received word that Ricci's men are checking emergency rooms in Brooklyn. The journey to the Castellano estate passed in tense silence. Elena clutched her small bag containing the few belongings she'd managed to gather from the apartment. Dawn was breaking over the Brooklyn skyline when the gates of the Castellano mansion swung open to admit them. The grandeur that had impressed her the previous evening now felt oppressive under morning light. As they entered the marble foyer, a young woman descended the grand staircase. Sofia Castellano possessed her father's amber eyes and commanding presence, though her slender frame and delicate features softened the effect. She wore designer jeans and a simple black sweater that probably cost more than Elena's monthly rent. Her expression registered surprise at Elena's disheveled appearance. I had your guest room prepared, Sofia said to her father, curiosity evident in her voice. Thank you, Dominic turned to Elena. You should rest. We'll discuss our next steps after you've had some sleep. Elena shook her head. I need answers first. Your father mentioned a blood oath. My grandmother warned me not to trust you. The map we found shows a location at the docks your family controls. None of this is coincidence. Dominic exchanged a glance with his daughter. Something unspoken passed between them before Sofia stepped forward. Let me show you to your room. You can clean up, change clothes. Then I promise we'll explain everything we know. Too exhausted to argue further, Elena followed Sofia up the grand staircase. The guest room turned out to be larger than Elena's entire apartment, decorated in tasteful blues and creams, with an adjoining marble bathroom. There are clothes in the closet that should fit you, Sofia said, lingering at the doorway. When my mother was killed 15 years ago, my father became obsessively protective. Try not to take his intensity personally. This unexpected revelation gave Elena pause. I'm sorry about your mother. Sophia's expression remained carefully neutral. Car bombing meant for my father. I was 7. The Ritchie family was suspected, but there was never enough evidence to prove it. She hesitated before adding, when my grandfather mentioned the Ferraro name last night, it was the first time I'd seen him truly animated in years. Whatever connection exists between our families clearly matters to him. After Sophia left, Elena stood under the shower's hot spray trying to process everything that had happened in the past 12 hours. Her ordinary life as a waitress and culinary student had been shattered. Now she found herself in the mansion of one of Brooklyn's most powerful mafia families, with her grandmother fighting for life in the hospital and mysterious enemies searching for something her family had kept hidden for decades. The clothes in the closet, as Sophia had promised, fit surprisingly well. Designer jeans, silk blouses, and cashmere sweaters with tags still attached. Elena selected the simplest options, uncomfortable with this unexpected charity. When she emerged from the guest room 2 hours later, a uniformed staff member led her to Victor Castellano's private study. The elderly patriarch sat in a leather chair near the fireplace examining the documents from Isabella's hidden cache. Dominic stood by the window while Sophia sat cross-legged on an ottoman, studying the old map with intense concentration. Elena, Victor greeted her, his weathered face lighting up. You look so much like your grandmother did at your age. It's remarkable. Dominic turned from the window. How much did Isabella tell you about your family history? Almost nothing related to your family, Elena admitted, taking the seat Victor indicated. She taught me the old Sicilian dialect, told stories about village life, but never mentioned any connection to the Castellano name. Victor sighed heavily. After the explosion, after your great-grandparents died, the Ferraro family believed we had betrayed them. Your grandfather Alessandro was convinced I had orchestrated the tragedy to take control of our shared business interests. Did you? Elena asked bluntly. Victor didn't flinch at the accusation. No, the Castellano and Ferraro families swore a blood oath after World War II. Our fathers fought together in the resistance against Mussolini. When they came to America, they built their importing business on that foundation of absolute trust. Sophia spread the old map on a table where everyone could see it. This shows a shipping channel that doesn't appear on modern maps. It was altered after the harbor renovations in the 1960s. The explosion happened here, Victor pointed to the red circle on the map, our shared warehouse. 11 people died, including your great-grandparents and my older brother Anthony. Dominic stepped closer, his shadow falling across the map. What were you importing that made the warehouse a target? Victor's expression grew guarded. Official manifests showed olive oil wine cheeses. But after the war, many treasures disappeared from museums and private collections across Europe. Some found their way to America through various channels. You were smuggling stolen art, Elena said, realization dawning. Not stolen, Victor corrected. Salvaged, rescued from destruction during the chaos of war. Valuable pieces with centuries of history that would otherwise have been lost forever. Dominic's jaw tightened. And the explosion. We always believed it was a rival operation, Victor said. But your grandfather, he looked at Elena, claimed to have found evidence pointing to someone specific. Before he could reveal it, he and your grandmother disappeared with their infant daughter Isabella. We never saw them again. Elena processed this information, connecting it with her grandmother's fragmented warnings. At the hospital, my grandmother mentioned a bank, Banco Siciliano, and a safe deposit box. Dominic immediately pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. The Sicilian Bank of Brooklyn closed 30 years ago. The building still stands in Red Hook now, converted to luxury apartments. But the vault remained intact as an architectural feature, Sophia added, reading from her tablet. The safe deposit boxes were removed when the bank closed, except for those that were never claimed. Elena reached into her pocket, withdrawing the brass key with the eagle lion crest. This might be what they're looking for. My grandmother kept it hidden all these years. Victor leaned forward, excitement lighting his aged features. The combined family crest. This could unlock the evidence Alessandro found, the proof that could finally reveal who was really behind the explosion. Dominic remained skeptical. After 70 years, why would Ricci suddenly care about ancient history? Perhaps it's not the history he cares about, Sophia suggested. But what was lost in that explosion? The shipment itself. A heavy silence fell over the room as they all considered the implications. Victor finally broke it with a sad smile. Giovanni and I swore that our families would protect each other no matter what. For 70 years, I've lived with the knowledge that I failed in that oath. Now fate has brought Elena to us, perhaps giving us one last chance to make things right. The door opened as Vincent Romano entered, his expression grave. We have a situation. One of our men at the hospital reports two of Ricci's people attempting to access Mrs. Ferraro's room. Hospital security stopped them, but they'll try again. Elena stood immediately. I need to go to her. Too dangerous, Dominic countered. If they're making such a bold move, they're desperate. We need to increase security at the hospital and move carefully. While keeping your grandmother safe, Sophia added. We should investigate the old bank building. If there's evidence hidden there, we need to find it before Ricci does. Dominic nodded agreement. Sophia, you'll coordinate the hospital security from here. Vincent, prepare a team for the bank operation. We move tonight. Elena stepped into the center of the room, her patience exhausted. Stop planning around me. This is my grandmother's life at stake, my family's history. I'm not sitting safely in this mansion while you make all the decisions. Dominic studied her with new appreciation. What do you propose? I'm going to the hospital. No one will question a granddaughter visiting. While I'm ensuring she's safe, you can prepare her for the bank operation, which I will be part of. The key belongs to my family. Victor chuckled softly. She has Ferraro's spirit, Dominic. You won't win this argument. After a tense moment, Dominic conceded with a curt nod. You'll have two of my men with you at the hospital. Plain clothes, discreet, but they don't leave your side. And you return here before dark. The hospital visit proved both comforting and concerning. Isabella remained unconscious, but the doctors reported her condition had stabilized. Elena sat beside her grandmother's bed, talking softly in their shared Sicilian dialect, sharing memories of cooking together in their small kitchen, learning family recipes passed down through generations. As evening approached, one of Dominic's men, Marco, appeared at the doorway, subtly signaling it was time to leave. Elena kissed her grandmother's forehead, promising to return soon with answers. In the corridor outside, Marco's posture suddenly stiffened. Change of plans, he murmured, guiding Elena toward the service elevator instead of the main lobby. We spotted Ricci himself entering the hospital. Elena's pulse quickened. Why would he come personally? That's what worries me, Marco replied, checking the service corridor before ushering her forward. They had almost reached the service exit when a smooth voice called out behind them. Ms. Ferraro, what a pleasure to finally meet you properly. Antonio Ricci stood blocking their path, flanked by two men whose bulging jackets poorly concealed their weapons. His silver hair and tailored suit projected sophisticated wealth, but his eyes remained cold and calculating. Marco moved protectively in front of Elena, his hand sliding subtly beneath his jacket. No need for unpleasantness, Ricci said with a thin smile. I merely wish to express my concern for Mrs. Ferraro's health. Heart problems can be so unpredictable at her age. The implied threat hung in the air between them. Elena stepped forward, refusing to show fear. What do you want, Mr. Ricci? Direct, I appreciate that quality. Ricci studied her with unsettling intensity. Your grandmother possesses something that rightfully belongs to my family. Something that was taken from my father many years ago. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. The map. The key. Ricci stepped closer. The Castellano family has filled your head with their version of history, no doubt. But there are always multiple perspectives to consider. Marco tensed, ready to draw his weapon despite being outnumbered. The standoff might have escalated if not for the timely arrival of hospital security responding to an emergency call in another wing. Ricci and his men stepped back, unwilling to create a scene. We'll continue this conversation another time, Ricci promised. When you're not under Dominic Castellano's thumb. Remember, Ms. Ferraro, he protects you and only because you're useful to him. Ask him about your grandfather's disappearance sometime. Ask what really happened to Alessandro Ferraro after he discovered the truth. With that parting shot, Ricci departed, leaving Elena shaken. Marco hurried her through the service exit to a waiting car, where Dominic himself sat in the driver's seat, expression thunderous when he learned of the encounter. He's getting desperate, Dominic observed, pulling smoothly into traffic. coming personally instead of sending his men. Whatever's in that safe deposit box, he fears it. Elena recounted Ricci's parting words. He suggested you know something about my grandfather's disappearance. Dominic's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Classic manipulation. Create doubt between allies. My father was devastated when Alessandro disappeared. They were like brothers once. The city lights blurred as they drove in silence, Elena wrestling with questions that multiplied by the hour. By the time they returned to the Castellano mansion, Sofia had already prepared for the bank operation, laying out floor plans of the converted building and security details. The vault remains intact on the basement level, Sofia explained, as they gathered around the dining table that now served as an operations center, maintained as a historical feature in the converted apartments. The original safe deposit boxes were removed, but according to building renovation permits, a section of the wall was preserved intact for architectural heritage. Where our family crests would have been positioned, Victor added, pointing to an architectural drawing. The Ferraro Castellano boxes would have been custom installations, not part of the standard numbering system, hidden in plain sight. Dominic outlined the plan. The building has standard security, cameras, door sensors, one-night guard, nothing we can't handle discreetly. Elena's key is our primary objective, though we don't know exactly what we're looking for until we're inside. I'm coming with you, Elena stated firmly. Dominic studied her with measuring eyes. It's not a sightseeing tour. If something goes wrong, it's my family's history, Elena interrupted. My grandmother is in the hospital because of it. The key belongs to me. I'm coming. After a moment, Dominic nodded. Stay close to me at all times. Do exactly as I say when I say it. The operation began just after midnight. Dressed in black, Elena felt surreal slipping through the shadows beside Dominic and two of his most trusted men. The luxury apartment building that had once been Banco Siciliano stood dark and quiet, its Art Deco facade illuminated by subtle architectural lighting. Vincent had already disabled the security system, temporarily creating a loop in the surveillance feed that would show empty hallways. The night guard was easily distracted by a minor commotion created by another team member at the front entrance, allowing them to slip through a service door and descend to the basement level. The old bank vault remained impressive despite its conversion to a decorative feature. The massive round door stood permanently open, revealing the interior space now used as a resident's wine cellar and tasting room. The original safe deposit box wall would have been here, Sofia had explained during their briefing, indicating the far wall now covered with modern wine racks. According to the renovation plans, they preserved a section behind a false panel as a nod to the building's history. Dominic moved with surprising grace for a man his size, examining the wall carefully with a small flashlight. Look for anything with our family crests, eagle and lion. Elena ran her fingers along the wooden wine racks, feeling for inconsistencies. The key in her pocket seemed to grow heavier with each passing moment. Near the corner, her fingers detected a slight difference in the wall texture behind one rack. Here, she whispered, something feels different. Dominic joined her, examining the section she indicated. With careful pressure, a panel in the wall slid aside, revealing an aged metal installation that had clearly remained untouched during renovations. A small keyhole marked with the combined Castellano-Ferraro crest waited in the center. Elena withdrew the brass key, its eagle lion design matching perfectly. With trembling fingers, she inserted it into the lock. Decades of disuse made the mechanism stiff, but with gentle pressure, it turned. A small compartment opened, revealing a leather portfolio sealed with wax bearing the same eagle lion insignia. Dominic checked his watch. We need to move. Vincent can only guarantee 20 minutes of camera loop before security might notice. They retraced their steps through the building, emerging into the cool night air without incident. Only when they were safely back in the car did Elena allow herself to breathe normally again. The portfolio sat heavy in her lap, its contents still unknown. Not here, Dominic cautioned when she began to break the seal. Too exposed. Wait until we're back at the house. The return journey seemed eternal, though it took less than 20 minutes. Victor and Sofia waited anxiously in the study, faces lighting with anticipation when they entered with the portfolio. Elena placed it on the desk, then carefully broke the wax seal. Inside lay a collection of documents, photographs, and a small notebook with Alessandro Ferraro's name inscribed on the cover. The photographs showed the Brooklyn docks from various angles, focusing on specific warehouses and ships. Several featured three men together, Victor's younger self, Giovanni Ferraro, and a third man, Elena, now recognized from other photos as Lorenzo Ricci Antonio's father. The notebook contained Alessandro's personal investigation notes, written in the same Sicilian dialect Elena had learned from Isabella. As she translated passages aloud, the room grew increasingly tense. March 3, 1955, Lorenzo visited the warehouse alone after hours, claimed he was checking inventory, but Giovanni found him examining the hidden compartment in the office floor. The special shipment arrives next week. Dominic leaned closer as Elena continued reading. March 8, overheard Lorenzo arguing with someone on the telephone, mentioned eliminating complications and claiming what's rightfully mine. Must warn Victor. Victor's hands trembled slightly as memories from 70 years prior resurfaced. I remember Alessandro trying to tell me something about Lorenzo the day before the explosion. I was too busy with shipment preparations to listen properly. The final entry, dated March 15, 1955, the day before the explosion, contained the most damning evidence. Found wiring in the warehouse basement, not electrical. Followed to crates of explosives hidden behind the wine barrels. LR initials on the detonator box. Taking photographs as evidence. Going to police tomorrow morning. But most shocking were the final items in the portfolio deed documents for a ship called Sicilian Star, showing joint ownership between the Castellano and Ferraro families' insurance documents and a detailed manifest of the vessel's final cargo. The list included priceless artifacts, Renaissance paintings, and ancient Sicilian treasures, with a total insured value that would be worth hundreds of millions in today's currency. The ship never reached port, Victor explained, voice hollow with old grief. It was reported lost in a storm off the coast, but Giovanni and I had already unloaded the most valuable pieces into our warehouse for private distribution. The explosion destroyed everything, or so we thought. Dominic studied the manifest carefully. If even a portion of these items survived, my grandfather must have suspected the ship wasn't really lost, Elena said, connecting pieces of the puzzle. These insurance documents are marked with questions. He was investigating both the explosion and the ship's disappearance. Sophia, who had been examining the photographs, suddenly held one up. Look at this. It shows the harbor from above, but there's something marked in the water here. She pointed to a faint circle in the photograph's corner coordinates written in faded ink beside it. The true location of the Sicilian Star, Victor breathed. Not lost at sea, but deliberately sunk in the harbor. That's what Ricci is after, Dominic concluded. Not just evidence of his father's crimes, but the location of a shipment worth a fortune. A shipment that legally belongs to the Castellano and Ferraro families. Elena sat back, overwhelmed by the implications. My grandmother was right to be afraid. This is worth killing for. Knowledge is power, Victor said gravely. Now we know the truth, but Ricci knows we know. The next move will be his, and it will be desperate. As if summoned by his words, Vincent burst into the study, his normally composed demeanor shaken. There's been an incident at the hospital. Someone attempted to access Mrs. Ferraro's room again, but our men intercepted them. The situation is secure, but... He hesitated, glancing at Elena. But what? She demanded, rising to her feet. Mrs. Ferraro is awake and agitated. She's demanding to see you immediately. She claims to have information that can't wait, something she didn't hide in the wall or the bank. Dominic checked his watch. It's nearly 3 in the morning. She's insisting, Vincent emphasized. The doctors are concerned about her heart rate. Elena was already moving toward the door. I need to go to her. It could be a trap, Dominic warned. Ricci could be monitoring the hospital, waiting for you to return. Then come with me, Elena challenged. Isn't that why we made this alliance, to protect each other? The word alliance hung in the air between them, carrying echoes of the oath their grandfathers had made decades earlier. After a moment, Dominic nodded. We go together, but first we secure these documents in my safe, and we prepare for the possibility that Ricci is making his move. As they gathered their things, Elena noticed Dominic studying her with an expression she couldn't quite interpret. Something had shifted between them over the past 24 hours. What had begun as reluctant protection had evolved into something more complex. Respect, perhaps. Or something deeper neither was ready to acknowledge. Your grandmother was right about one thing, Dominic said quietly as they prepared to leave. The Castellanos can be dangerous, but only to those who threaten what we care about. The statement hung between them, ambiguous in its implications. As they departed for the hospital, Elena realized she now stood at the center of a 70-year-old blood feud, with the truth about her family's past finally emerging from shadows. Whatever information Isabella urgently needed to share, Elena sensed it would only deepen the dangerous waters they now navigated together. Silvery moonlight washed over the sleek Mercedes as Dominic drove through Brooklyn's silent streets toward the hospital. Elena sat beside him, clutching a small leather bag containing her grandmother's rosary and a change of clothes. Vincent and Marco followed in a second vehicle, alert for any sign of surveillance. "Your grandmother must have kept other secrets," Dominic observed, breaking the tense silence. "Something not in the documents or the safe deposit box." Elena nodded, watching shadows pass over his profile. "Isabella survived when everyone else was lost. She raised my mother alone, then me after my parents died. She's carried these secrets for 70 years. That takes remarkable strength," Dominic acknowledged. His usual stoic expression softened momentarily. "My father carried his guilt for decades, believing he failed to protect his blood brother's family." The hospital corridor gleamed under fluorescent lights as they approached Isabella's room. Two of Dominic's men stood guard outside, straightening respectfully as he approached. The night nurse nodded permission for them to enter, despite the late hour, a testament to Dominic's influence. Isabella sat propped against pillows, looking frail, yet somehow more alert than before. Her silver hair hung loose around shoulders, once strong enough to carry the weight of family tragedy. When she saw Dominic enter behind Elena, her expression hardened. "So it's true. You've aligned with them." Despite her physical weakness, Isabella's voice carried decades of bitterness. Elena took her grandmother's hand gently. "We found the evidence, Nonna. We know Lorenzo Ricci caused the explosion. He betrayed both families." Isabella's eyes widened slightly. "You found Alessandro's proof. In the bank vault. The key opened a hidden compartment with all his documentation." Elena hesitated before adding, "We also found the ship manifest and the coordinates." Isabella closed her eyes briefly, shoulders sagging with what might have been relief. "Then you understand what's at stake. But there's more. Something Alessandro never wrote down, something too dangerous to document." Dominic stepped closer, keeping a respectful distance from the bed. "Mrs. Ferraro, whatever information you have could help protect your granddaughter. Antonio Ricci is moving aggressively." Isabella studied him with suspicious eyes. "You look like your father did at your age. The same ambition in your eyes." She turned back to Elena. "The ship's Sicilian star carried more than art treasures. There was a second manifest, a secret one." "What kind of cargo?" Dominic asked quietly. "Documents, ledgers, names." Isabella's voice dropped to nearly a whisper. "After the war, many powerful men needed their pasts erased. Collaborators who became respected businessmen overnight. War criminals who became politicians. The Sicilian star carried their secrets, their true histories, payment records, photographs, insurance against betrayal." Elena exchanged a significant glance with Dominic. "Blackmail material." "Information," Isabella corrected. "Power. Lorenzo Ricci wanted it desperately. Not just the art treasures, though they were valuable enough. He wanted the ledgers that could destroy or control dozens of powerful families, including his own." Dominic's expression darkened with understanding. "And now his son pursues the same prize." Isabella nodded weakly. "Antonio found something among his father's possessions. Something that led him to believe the ship and its cargo might be recoverable." Her breathing grew labored as she continued. "Alessandro suspected Lorenzo had redirected the ship, reported it lost, while actually sinking it in a hidden location to recover later." "The coordinates in the photograph," Elena realized. "Yes, but Alessandro discovered something else. Something that made Lorenzo eliminate anyone who knew about the ship." Isabella's grip tightened on Elena's hand. "The night before the explosion, Alessandro confronted Lorenzo, threatened to expose him. Lorenzo swore revenge against both families. Which is why you've been in hiding all these years," Dominic concluded. Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "Not just hiding, waiting. Alessandro said if anything happened to him, I should wait until both Lorenzo and Victor were gone. Only then would it be safe to retrieve what belongs to our families." "But Victor is still alive," Elena pointed out. "And Lorenzo is long dead," Dominic added. His son Antonio runs their organization now. Isabella's expression hardened. Victor Castellano was supposed to be at the warehouse that day. His meeting ran late, saving his life while my parents and others died. For years, I believed he might have known about the bomb. He didn't, Dominic stated with quiet certainty. My father has carried that survivor's guilt for 70 years. A fragile silence fell over the room, decades of suspicion and grief hanging in the balance. Finally, Isabella spoke again. There's one more thing Alessandro left. Something I kept separate from everything else. With trembling hands, she removed a thin gold chain from around her neck. A small key dangled from it, different from the one that had opened the bank vault. This opens a waterproof case attached to the ship's hull. Inside is the second manifest and ledgers. The case has a fail-safe. If opened incorrectly, the contents are destroyed. As Elena accepted the key, Isabella gripped her wrist with surprising strength. Be careful who you trust, my child. Even those who believe they seek justice may choose power when it's within reach. Her gaze flickered meaningfully toward Dominic, the warning clear. Before Elena could respond, medical alarms began blaring. Isabella's monitors showed dangerous heart rhythm fluctuations as she collapsed back against the pillows. The next few minutes dissolved into chaos as medical staff rushed into the room, forcing Elena and Dominic into the hallway. They watched through the window as doctors worked desperately to stabilize Isabella. She's fighting, Dominic said quietly, like a true Ferraro. The doctor eventually emerged looking grave but cautiously optimistic. We've stabilized her, but these episodes are taking a severe toll. Her heart can't sustain this level of stress much longer. Can I stay with her? Elena asked. She's sedated now and will remain so through the night. The best thing you can do is let her rest. The doctor glanced at his watch. Visiting hours begin at 9 tomorrow morning. As they left the hospital, the eastern sky showed the first hints of dawn. Elena felt the weight of both keys against her chest. The Eagle Lion crest key, and now Isabella's smaller golden key, both hanging from chains around her neck. What now? She asked as they reached the car. We analyzed the coordinates, prepare for a retrieval operation. Dominic's tactical mind was already mapping possibilities. But first we need to understand what we're up against. Ricci won't give up easily. Back at the Castellano mansion, they found Sofia and Victor still awake, poring over maritime charts of Brooklyn Harbor. Sofia had overlaid modern sonar mapping data with the historical photographs, narrowing down possible locations for the sunken Sicilian star. The coordinates point to this section. Sofia indicated a deep channel relatively close to shore, now mostly unused since the harbor reconfiguration in the 1960s. The water's depth would have kept it hidden from casual discovery. Victor studied the information with keen interest. Can we be certain the ship is still there after 70 years? Harbor sediment would have partially buried it, Sofia explained, but the structure itself would remain largely intact. Ships from that era were built to last. Dominic outlined what Isabella had revealed about the second manifest and the waterproof case. This changes everything. What Ricci wants isn't just valuable art. It's leverage against powerful families. Information that could destabilize more than just our operations. Or consolidate unprecedented power in his hands, Victor added grimly. Elena felt overwhelmed by the implications. Just days ago, her biggest concerns had been tuition payments and her grandmother's medical bills. Now she stood at the center of a decades-old conspiracy involving sunken treasures, blackmail material, and three of Brooklyn's most powerful families. We need specialized equipment for underwater retrieval, Dominic continued. Vincent is making arrangements, but it will take at least 24 hours to assemble everything discreetly. Ricci won't wait that long, Victor warned. If he's determined enough to send men into a hospital, he's already moving on the harbor location. Elena's exhaustion finally caught up with her. Despite the high stakes, her body demanded rest. Sofia noticed her fatigue and gently suggested she get some sleep while they continued preparations. Too tired to argue, Elena retreated to the guest room, where she fell into an uneasy slumber, still wearing both keys around her neck. She woke several hours later to soft knocking. Sofia entered with a tray of food and fresh coffee, her expression sympathetic. You slept through lunch. I thought you might be hungry. Elena accepted the offering gratefully. Any news about my grandmother? Stable according to the hospital. Our men report no further attempts by Ricci's people to access her room. Sofia sat on the edge of the bed. The diving equipment arrives tonight. My father is coordinating the operation for dawn tomorrow. Elena sipped the rich coffee, organizing her thoughts. Why are you helping me? This goes beyond some old family obligation. Sophia considered the question carefully. When I was 7, my mother was killed in a car bombing meant for my father. That kind of loss, it changes a family forever. My father became simultaneously more protective and more distant. My grandfather retreated into memories of the past. She met Elena's gaze directly. When you arrived speaking the old dialect, something awakened in them both. Something I haven't seen since before my mother died. Hope, Elena suggested quietly. Purpose, Sophia corrected. The chance to right an old wrong, to fulfill an obligation left incomplete. In our world, such things matter more than you might understand. After Sophia left, Elena showered and changed into clothes that had been provided for her. Simple yet expensive items that fit surprisingly well. Making her way downstairs, she found Dominic alone in the kitchen, surprisingly domestic, as he prepared coffee using an ornate Italian espresso machine. My father and Sophia are finalizing details with the diving team, he explained, offering her a perfectly crafted espresso. I thought you might want to visit your grandmother before our harbor operation tomorrow. The gesture touched her unexpectedly. Thank you, I would. Dominic leaned against the counter, studying her with those perceptive amber eyes. You should know that Ricci has been asking questions around the harbor, inquiring about unusual activity in the old shipping channel. He knows the location. He suspects at least, which means our window of opportunity is closing quickly. The hospital visit that afternoon found Isabella awake but weak. The doctors reported her condition as stable but precarious. Any additional stress could trigger another cardiac episode. I'm going with them to find the ship tomorrow, Elena told her grandmother softly, holding her frail hand. We'll recover what belongs to our family. Isabella's eyes filled with tears. Be careful, tesoro mio. The past doesn't always stay buried peacefully. She glanced toward the door where Dominic waited respectfully out of earshot. That man, he's not just helping you out of obligation. Elena followed her gaze. What do you mean? I see how he looks at you, the same way Alessandro once looked at me. Isabella's weathered hand squeezed Elena's gently. The Castellanos love deeply, protect fiercely. But their world is dangerous, Elena. Once you're part of it, there's no simple escape. This will be over soon, Elena promised. We'll recover what was lost, and our lives can return to normal. Isabella's smile held ancient wisdom. Some journeys change us too much for us to ever go back, my child. As dusk settled over Brooklyn, Elena and Dominic returned to the mansion for final preparations. The diving team, former Navy specialists now working exclusively for the Castellano family, had arrived with equipment and were reviewing the operation parameters with Sophia and Vincent. The target area is relatively accessible, the lead diver explained, indicating underwater survey maps, but visibility will be limited even with our equipment. We'll need precise coordinates. Victor entered the room moving more slowly than usual, the weight of decades visibly heavy on his shoulders tonight. After 70 years, we'll finally recover what was lost. Giovanni would be proud to see our families united in this effort. Dominic drew Elena aside while the others continued discussing technical details. Once we locate the ship, things may escalate quickly. Ricci has resources throughout the harbor. We need to be prepared for confrontation. I'm not afraid, Elena stated, surprising herself with the truth of it. You should be, Dominic countered seriously. Fear keeps you sharp, keeps you alive. But courage, his gaze held hers with unexpected intensity. Courage in the face of that fear is what separates leaders from followers. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither was prepared to name. Finally, Dominic broke the silence. Get some rest. We move at 4 a.m. Dawn had not yet broken when they assembled at a private dock owned by the Castellano family. The early morning air carried the scent of salt water and diesel as the specialized boat was prepared. Elena had dressed practically in dark clothes provided by Sophia, her hair tied back securely. Both keys hung around her neck, constant reminders of her purpose. Dominic appeared beside her at the dock, railing his powerful frame, silhouetted against the harbor lights. He'd abandoned his usual business attire for tactical clothing that emphasized his physical prowess. A shoulder holster visible beneath his jacket served as a stark reminder of the potential dangers ahead. Second thoughts? He asked quietly. Elena shook her head. This is my family's legacy too. I need to see it through. The harbor waters lay dark and still as their boat moved quietly toward the coordinates. Sophisticated sonar equipment scanned the depths below, searching for the distinctive outline of a ship. Vincent monitored the equipment while the dive team prepared their gear. We have company, Sophia reported suddenly from her position at the stern, binoculars raised. Two boats approaching from the South Channel. Dominic moved instantly to her side, taking the binoculars. Ricci, he confirmed grimly, moving faster than we anticipated. The lead diver approached with urgent news. We've got a solid contact. Ship-sized object at the coordinates, buried in silt but structurally intact. How quickly can you reach it? Dominic demanded. 20 minutes down and to the target. Another 20 to locate and retrieve any secured containers, assuming the visibility allows. Dominic made a rapid decision. Begin the dive now. We'll handle Ricci. As the dive team deployed into the dark waters, Dominic organized their defense. Vincent distributed weapons from a hidden compartment while Sophia manned communications. Elena watched in fascination as the Castellano family transformed before her eyes, business personas giving way to a disciplined operation that spoke of generations of experience in protecting what was theirs. Stay down and out of sight, Dominic instructed Elena, positioning her near the cabin. If shooting starts, get below deck immediately. The approaching boat slowed as they neared powerful spotlights sweeping across the water toward them. A voice called out through a megaphone. Castellano, this is private business you're interfering with. Dominic stepped forward confidently. These are Castellano waters, Ricci. You're the trespasser here. Through binoculars, Elena could make out Antonio Ricci standing at the bow of the lead boat, surrounded by armed men. The second vessel positioned itself to cut off any escape route. I see you've brought the Ferraro girl, Ricci called, having spotted Elena despite Dominic's precautions. Does she know the full story of her family's relationship with yours, the betrayals, the true reason for the explosion? We found Alessandro's evidence, Dominic replied coldly. We know your father planted the bomb. Ricci laughed, the sound carrying across the water. My father was a businessman protecting his interests. The Castellanos and Ferraros were cutting him out of a lucrative arrangement. He simply renegotiated. By murdering 11 people, Elena called out, unable to contain herself despite Dominic's warning glare. Collateral damage in our world, my dear. Something your new friends understand quite well. Ricci's voice took on a harder edge. I'll make you an offer, Castellano. Share the location of the manifest, and I'll ensure the girl and her grandmother live comfortable lives. Beneath the boats, the dive team worked methodically on the silty harbor bottom. Their powerful lights revealed the ghostly outline of the Sicilian star, its wooden hull partially preserved by the harbor mud that had entombed it for 70 years. The divers moved carefully toward the captain's quarters, following the historical diagrams Sophia had provided. Above, the standoff continued. Dominic positioned himself partially in front of Elena, his posture relaxed but ready. You have no claim to what lies below Ricci. The ship and its cargo legally belong to the Castellano and Ferraro families. Legal claims from a mafia boss, Ricci mocked. How times change. The tension escalated as Ricci's men visibly readied their weapons. Elena's heart pounded against her ribs, the keys against her chest, seeming to burn with significance. Whatever was happening below would determine all their fates. Sophia approached quietly from behind. The dive team reports they've located a metal case secured to the hull, exactly where Isabella's information indicated. They're preparing to retrieve it now. Dominic gave an almost imperceptible nod, then addressed Ricci again. This doesn't need to end in bloodshed, Antonio. Your father made his choice 70 years ago. That debt has been paid. Paid? Ricci's voice rose with barely controlled fury. My father spent decades searching for what your families hid, the power, the connections that should have been ours. The confrontation was interrupted by the dive team's leader surfacing beside their boat. He climbed aboard quickly, carrying a sealed metal case roughly the size of a briefcase. Water streamed from its apparently intact seal as he handed it reverently to Dominic. Seeing the case, Ricci lost all pretense of negotiation. Take it, he ordered his men. Whatever it costs. What followed unfolded with nightmarish speed. Gunfire erupted from Ricci's boats as his men opened fire. Dominic shoved Elena roughly toward the cabin while returning fire with practiced precision. Vincent and the security team created a protective barrier, their controlled response suggesting this was hardly their first gunfight. From her position, half sheltered by the cabin door, Elena watched in horrified fascination. Dominic moved with a lethal grace, his actions economical and devastatingly effective. This was the other side of the sophisticated businessman, the mafia leader who had risen to power through more than just shrewd investments. The firefight ended almost as quickly as it began. Several of Ricci's men lay wounded on their vessels, while Antonio himself crouched behind protective cover, his advantage clearly lost. The Castellano side had suffered only minor injuries, a testament to their superior position and training. "It's over, Ricci," Dominic called out, his voice carrying commanding authority across the water. "Retreat now, and we can all leave this harbor alive." For a moment, it seemed Ricci would accept the offer. Then, with startling swiftness, he emerged from cover with a pistol aimed not at Dominic but directly at Elena. "The case," he demanded, "or she dies where she stands." Time seemed to slow. Elena saw Dominic's expression shift from tactical calculation to something far more personal, a cold fury that transformed his features. Before Ricci could steady his aim, Dominic fired a single shot with unerring accuracy. Antonio Ricci collapsed to the deck of his boat, his weapon clattering uselessly, aside a shoulder wound, incapacitating but not fatal. In the sudden silence that followed, the wail of distant police sirens became audible, approaching rapidly. "Harbor Patrol," Vincent reported tensely. "Someone reported gunfire." "Time to leave," Dominic ordered. As the engines roared to life, he turned to Elena, his expression shifting from hardened fighter back to concerned protector. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, still processing what she had witnessed. The elegant businessman had transformed into a lethal defender before her eyes, then back again with unsettling ease. As their boat sped away from the scene, leaving Ricci's men to explain the gunfight to authorities, Elena clutched the recovered case in her lap. The metal box represented 70 years of secrets, pain, and power. Its weight seemed disproportionate to its size, as if the decades of history made it heavier somehow. They returned to a private dock miles from the confrontation site, where vehicles waited to transport them back to the Castellano estate. The ride passed in tense silence, adrenaline still coursing through their systems. At the mansion they gathered in Victor's study, the elderly patriarch waited anxiously, his expression lighting with vindication when he saw the case. Elena placed it carefully on the desk, then removed the small gold key from around her neck. "Isabella said there's a fail-safe," she reminded them. "If opened incorrectly, the contents self-destruct." Victor nodded solemnly. Giovanni was always careful with valuable information. There would be a specific mechanism. Elena examined the lock carefully. Unlike modern designs, this showed the craftsmanship of another era. The keyhole featured subtle markings around its edge, the phases of the moon etched into the metal. "New moon to full," she murmured, remembering her grandmother's stories about Sicilian folklore. "Always turn toward the light, never toward darkness." Understanding the clue, she inserted the key and turned it clockwise, toward the full moon etching rather than the new moon. The lock clicked open with surprising ease for its age. Inside lay several waterproof document pouches remarkably preserved. The first contained the second ship manifest listing in detail the art treasures and their true provenances. The value in today's market would be astronomical. The second pouch held what they had truly sought, leather-bound ledgers containing names, dates, transactions, and photographs. Page after page documented the secret histories of powerful families across Europe and America, including evidence of war crimes, collaboration with fascist regimes, and subsequent bribery of officials to create new identities after the war. "This is dynamite," Sophia whispered, scanning the pages with wide eyes. "Some of these families still hold significant power today." Dominic's expression remained carefully neutral as he examined the material. This kind of information, it could destroy dozens of legitimate businesses, topple political careers, reshape entire power structures, or ensure the Castellano family's dominance for generations, Victor added quietly, watching his son with knowing eyes. Elena felt the weight of the moment. This was what Isabella had warned about, the temptation such power represented. Even to a man with Dominic's principles, the ledgers offered unprecedented leverage. "What will you do with them?" she asked Dominic, directly, her question cutting through the tension. All eyes turned to him. As head of the Castellano family, the decision ultimately rested in his hands. Elena saw the calculation in his eyes, the assessment of possibilities. For a heart-stopping moment, she feared Isabella had been right about the corrupting nature of such power. Then Dominic's expression cleared resolution, replacing contemplation. These documents belong equally to the Castellano and Ferraro families. We'll make decisions about their disposition together as partners. Victor smiled with quiet pride at his son's choice. First, Dominic continued, we use select information to ensure Ricci faces justice for his father's crimes in today's attack. The evidence goes to federal authorities through our legitimate channels. And the rest, Sophia asked, we'll discuss options with Elena and Isabella. Dominic turned to Elena. Some secrets perhaps deserve to remain buried. Others might provide long overdue justice. These aren't decisions to be made hastily or unilaterally. Elena felt something shift in her perception of Dominic Castellano. Beneath the power and dangerous capability lay a moral compass she hadn't fully appreciated until this moment. The hospital called an hour later with news that Isabella had improved enough to be moved to a private room. Elena went immediately to share their discovery, bringing photographs of the recovered documents rather than the originals. Isabella wept quietly when Elena recounted the events at the harbor. Alessandro always believed the truth would eventually come to light. He died protecting that belief. The Castellanos kept their word, Elena said gently, the blood oath between our families. Isabella studied her granddaughter's face carefully. I see something has changed in you. The Castellano world has begun to work its influence. I've seen another side of them, Elena acknowledged. There's honor there alongside the danger. And Dominic, Isabella asked perceptively, I see his father's intensity in him, but perhaps more conscience. Elena felt warmth rise to her cheeks. He protected me today, without hesitation or calculation. Isabella smiled knowingly. The heart chooses its own path regardless of family histories or logical considerations. She patted Elena's hand. Your grandfather would say life is too precious to waste on old grudges. Perhaps it's time for both our families to look forward instead of back. In the following weeks, events moved with remarkable speed. Using carefully selected evidence from the recovered ledgers, the Castellano family's legitimate business attorneys provided federal authorities with documentation of Ricci's criminal activities. Antonio Ricci was arrested on multiple charges, including attempted murder and conspiracy. The art treasures documented in the manifest were quietly recovered from the Sicilian star under the supervision of both families. Rather than selling the priceless pieces on the black market, as their grandfathers might have done, Dominic and Elena made a different choice. They established the Castellano Ferraro Foundation for Cultural Preservation, creating a private museum where the treasures could be displayed for selected audiences while their provenances were carefully researched. 1 year later, Elena stood in the gleaming headquarters of Castellano Ferraro Imports, watching ships move across the harbor from her corner office window. Isabella, now fully recovered after successful heart surgery and comprehensive treatment, sat in a comfortable chair nearby. Her health had improved dramatically, and her perspective on the Castellano family had undergone an equally remarkable transformation. Your great-grandfather would be proud, Isabella remarked in perfect Sicilian. You've brought the family business back to its original purpose, legitimate trade between our two homelands. The office door opened as Dominic entered his customary black suit, replaced by a more approachable charcoal gray that still managed to convey authority. The past year had softened some of his harder edges, though Elena knew he still maintained the connections and influence that kept their business operations running smoothly. The Tokyo contracts are finalized, he announced, dropping a folder on Elena's desk before leaning down to kiss Isabella's cheek affectionately. And your doctors have approved that trip to Sicily you have been planning. Elena's heart swelled as she watched this interaction, remembering how Dominic had initially intimidated her grandmother before gradually winning her over with respectful attention and genuine interest in her stories about Sicily. Their unlikely friendship had been the first sign that her worlds could successfully merge. The old village hasn't changed much, according to my contacts. Dominic continued, moving to stand beside Elena at the window. Your grandmother's family home has been restored, ready for your visit next month. The Ricci trial had exposed decades of corruption and violence, clearing the path for the Ferraro-Castellano partnership to establish new legitimate business practices. Elena had testified about the attack on her grandmother, her clear testimony helping secure convictions against Antonio and his top lieutenants. I never thought I'd be grateful for speaking to a stranger in Sicilian dialect. Elena mused unconsciously, leaning into Dominic's solid presence beside her. One moment of recognition changed everything. Dominic's arms slipped around her waist, a gesture that still sent electricity through her, despite the year they'd spent gradually transforming from reluctant allies to business partners to something much more personal. Some would call it fate, he suggested, the hint of a smile softening his features. Outside their office window, a vintage wooden sailing vessel, painstakingly restored over the past year, glided into the harbor, its polished deck gleaming in the sunlight. The ship bore the combined Ferraro-Castellano crest on its sail, half eagle, half lion, a wedding gift from Victor that symbolized their family's seafaring heritage restored to its honorable origins. The modern Sicilian Renaissance project, Elena's brainchild launched 6 months ago, had already created legitimate jobs for dozens of at-risk youth from Brooklyn neighborhoods once controlled through intimidation. Isabella's traditional recipes, now produced in a commercial kitchen staffed by these same young people, were appearing on specialty grocery shelves across New York. The governor's office called this morning, Dominic mentioned casually, though Elena detected the pride in his voice. They want us to head the Commission on Harbor Revitalization. Apparently, our reputation for transforming family businesses has made quite an impression in Albany. Elena leaned into his solid presence, still amazed by how completely her life had changed in a single year. From struggling waitress to respected business leader, from hiding her heritage to embracing it fully, the language that had once endangered her had become her greatest asset, bridging cultures and healing wounds that had festered for generations. When Isabella tactfully excused herself to make phone calls, Dominic turned Elena to face him, his expression uncharacteristically nervous. "I've been carrying this for weeks," he admitted, producing a small velvet box from his pocket, "waiting for the right moment, which never seems to come in our chaotic lives." Elena's breath caught as he opened the box, revealing a vintage platinum ring with an emerald surrounded by diamonds. Elegant, unique, and nothing like the ostentatious jewelry that adorned the fingers of most mafia wives. "This belonged to my grandmother," he explained softly. The emerald caught the morning light, casting verdant reflections across Elena's face as she studied its intricate setting. The stone had been mined in Sicily and carried to America by Victor's father as his only valuable possession, a talisman of hope during desperate times that eventually became a symbol of his success in the New World. "My father told me this ring has never been offered to anyone outside our bloodline." Dominic explained, something vulnerable flickering across his usually guarded expression. "It was waiting for the day our families could truly heal the rift that tragedy created decades ago." This was more than a proposal. It was the fulfillment of a promise made before either of them was born. Around them, the harbor sounds faded to a distant murmur as the weight of history and possibility settled between them. Two people born into separate worlds that had once been one, now standing at the threshold of reunification that their ancestors had dreamed about but never lived to see. "The family's truly united," Elena whispered, understanding the symbolic weight of this heirloom being offered to her. The blood oath between Ferraros and Castellanos would be fulfilled not through business contracts, but through marriage, a genuine union rather than a strategic alliance. Dominic knelt before her, surprising Elena with this traditional gesture from a man who typically disregarded convention. "Elena Ferraro, sir," he said, his voice rough with emotion rarely displayed. "Will you build this new life with me away from the shadows our families once lived in?" Tears blurred Elena's vision as she nodded, extending her trembling left hand. "Yes," she whispered as he slipped the ring onto her finger. "From serving drinks at your father's party to this. Who could have predicted it?" The Brooklyn skyline stretched before them as Dominic pulled her into his arms, their silhouettes framed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the office, where they'd created something neither family could have achieved alone. A future unburdened by the sins of the past, built on honesty instead of fear. Victor Castellano and Isabella Ferraro watched discreetly from the doorway, their own eyes meeting with the satisfaction of witnessing a circle closed after 70 years. The blood oath made between their fathers had finally found its true fulfillment, not in vengeance or power, but in the union of two families once torn apart by tragedy. "Honor," Victor murmured in the ancient Sicilian dialect. "Family," Isabella responded in the same tongue. "Legacy," They finished together as the golden light of a new day illuminated the harbor where the Sicilian star had rested for 70 years, its secrets finally brought to light, its treasures reclaimed, and its story completed at last.